Hi Lucy, thanks for the intro and thanks as well to everyone here that's registered for this webinar. Already I'm demonstrating the first rule of remote working: find a dedicated space to work so you can leave it behind at the end of the day. It just so happens that my children and dog outrank me, so here I am in my shed. It's great to have the opportunity to discuss Agile ways of working and hopefully show how Agile approaches and techniques can be applied when you may be faced with distributed working conditions that, let's say, could hinder collaboration with your team members, with customers, or representatives of your business community. So let's crack on, and I'll show you some of the material that we generate to ensure that all parties are clear on the work in hand. To begin with, that smart young man in the picture isn't me. I don't think I could carry off that shirt. That's me, having been surprised by the appearance of a very large cat at my desk overnight. So, a brief bit of background on me. I've had the opportunity to work with clients across both public and private sectors, ranging from small delivery teams of 4 or 5 up to large government programs of 250 people and above. And I've been working in various roles, including coaching and mentoring, delivery management, as well as more purist Scrum Master capacities. And it's been years since I've last worked in a single collocated team. So today we'll be looking at the types of teams: distributed, collocated, remote working for some, etc. We'll consider the type of issues that they may face, and then walk through our approach that goes a reasonable way to overcome them. I'll show you some examples of outputs and artifacts, and the activities and events that these get generated in, which will hopefully show you how we can then mitigate some of the common delivery risks. And we'll wrap up with any questions or observations as well. It'd be great to hear how some of you are coping with the current situation we now find ourselves in. Okay, so to begin with, I was asked to participate in this webinar for 3 main reasons. The first is that I'm a fan of Agile working, and I'm a firm believer that it's the best approach to delivering great business solutions. Keeping closely aligned to business needs on an ongoing basis is vital for delivering valued output, and it enables teams to pivot if needed as they learn more about the business domain. The second is that given the current climate has suddenly become very distributed very quickly, there was some alignment on how some of my recent teams have been set up in a remote manner. So hopefully I can walk you through a typical project or sprint to give you a flavour of what we do. And thirdly, Triad recently ran a 2020 Tech Trends survey covering Agile in an attempt to discover whether people felt it was, to quote the survey headline, trending or ending. Some of the findings suggested that there continued to be frustrations, be that with organisational culture, budgets and using existing skill sets, and so on. When combined with a contrasting view from the IT department survey, however, which indicated that most technical teams believe that Agile adoption is only going to rise, then this seemed to be an opportune time to show how we at Triad helped bring the wider business along on their Agile journey. That said, as I see it, the common theme to success has been in the individuals and their capability to work at pace and together, having a can-do attitude. Without this, delivery fails irrespective of delivery methodology, or whether you've collocated or distributed teams. So you need to establish the team circumstance first. Once you know what you're dealing with, then the methodology can then be adapted to suit. So let's consider some scenarios. It may be that you've got 1 or more teams delivering a single product, or possibly 2 or more teams working across independent products. So what are the challenges that this may produce? I suppose, first up, can multiple teams all work on priority features? Well, at the home office, we had 2 teams in Croydon and 1 up in Newcastle, and we split the work into logical features. We had multiple teams that were able to work relatively independently. Managing your backlog to clearly break out components of a first release to each team is important, and we held shared refinement sessions where work started to show signs of overlap. This then allowed us to manage interdependencies. Now, I'm a firm believer in forecasting, and we triage our work regularly to assess upcoming delivery effort. More detail on this will be covered later on, but we need to give some sort of idea as to how long our work is likely to take, at the overall release level as well as at this more macro level. So it's important to forecast when we need the output from a dependent team to be ready by. Through forecasting based on team estimation, story points left between now and the time that the dependency needs to be ready, we can provide and iteratively update this target time. So how do we estimate the workload? Do we do it collectively or per team? Well, at the Ministry of Justice, we did it per team. We had a scheduling team and a resulting team, and we let each team define their complexity ratings. To mitigate dependencies, the supplying team, the scheduling team, would provide a stubbed test harness and data to allow both teams to work on their areas independently. As a result, both could safely work on a common interface, and when changes were necessary, this was only applied after collective agreement. Some other scenarios include having a team with some members remote, to people all over the place, and it's a bit like herding cats. So some scenarios here: central team with individuals working from home, or central team with remote working occasionally, or a whole team working remotely with occasional face-to-face meetups, and also including remote workers across different countries as well. And I guess since I've become a fully remote worker for the first time, the thing I'm missing most is the spontaneity and the ad hoc chats. Ad hoc communication becomes more structured when remote. There's a danger of over-communication, and you may perpetually be on Zoom chats. We've tried allotting a part of the day, in addition to lunch, for the team to focus on work without distraction. Physically collocated together means that we can see if someone is in the middle of something. When remote, there is perhaps more pressure to respond. So we introduced the power hour each day, so that we knew that we had a clear area where we could just get our heads down and focus on the work in hand. So first up, we try to ensure that we're clear on who's going to be where as well. So set up a central team calendar. We use TeamUp or DEFRA that was on the whiteboard, just to flag where people are. Schedule events that are supportive of time zones, and try and be sympathetic and fair. Don't hold events that always rely on the same people having an early or late working day. Let's try and vary it up a bit so that everyone's included. Remember, different countries have different bank holidays, etc. You may consider adding virtual coffee breaks. Online beers also go down well after work. And other challenges that we face is things like clarity on who's working on what, and we'll cover this more when we cover the events later on. There needs to be easy access to online communication. People need to be quick to jump on calls to encourage inclusion. We need to have access to desktop sharing facilities, and obviously test the process as well. Does everyone have what they need to perform their role? Do they understand the process for distributed working, where to find things, what the escalation procedures are, and get across the importance of promptness to meetings? There'll be enough "can you hear me's" or "sorry I was on mute" comments to prolong a meeting anyway, so let's not allow tardiness to prolong it any further. Okay, so we've all been trying it, and hopefully everyone will agree that generally it's been a really positive situation to be able to work where we want, cut down on commuting, spend time with the children, or in the comfort of your own shed. But working in a distributed manner requires discipline. There needs to be motivation to get on with work and be proactive in communicating. If work is running low, early warning is needed to ensure there's a pipeline established. Teams and individuals need to be reachable, so we need contact details readily available. There needs to be promptness to meetings, as I said. Communicate when you're unavailable. We need transparency. You need to be clear on what's being worked on and when you need help. Don't hide it or wait for the next stand-up to raise issues. And we need tools and resources available to us: online whiteboards, instant messaging, wikis, etc. Plus everyone needs to be familiar on how to use them. Remote working has been gathering pace for a while, but with the current pandemic, the move to more distributed teams is heightened. Ultimately, the methodology is largely respective. Both waterfall and agile ways of working demand close working relationships between delivery teams and customers, and if you don't have the tools and processes in place to achieve this relationship, you'll suffer. However, and I concede I'm biased on this, I think you'll unpick any problems quicker if you follow an agile mindset and be able to react more quickly to getting back on track. For any team or teams, to be effective and delivery focused, there needs to be a pipeline of work established to get our teeth into. To understand user needs and what your product or service should become, you need a means of holding workshops, conducting observations, and holding interviews to build a picture of any as-is state and start to build the to-be picture. And any material you gather, documentation, backlog, plans, user journeys, etc., needs to be held centrally for the team to have ongoing access to. Our methodology is loosely aligned to this four-phased approach based on the UK government's approach to agile delivery. Care is needed not to fall into the trap of doing requirements gathering, then design, then development, then testing in a like-live environment, because it can get a bit waterfallery. But fundamentally, we spend a brief period of time understanding the business needs and goals. We expend a little effort in preparing our delivery foundations before rolling into incremental delivery at pace. I've seen discovery take from a day up to 4 weeks, depending on the scale of the project and the clarity from the business. And the next few slides will cover examples of materials and activities that I typically expect to see undertaken, so that the working relationship between delivery teams and customer is established from the beginning. To begin any project, we want that punchy, high-level definition of what problem we're trying to overcome, why we should build over by, and for whom, etc. Now, these examples were at the extremes of the scale. DEFRA took a few weeks. We were working on the UK export process post-Brexit. There on the right, the EV route planning, we spent about a half a day workshop just to get initial thoughts and an incremental plan. But we want to create an elevator pitch. Can you describe to somebody in 20 seconds why you should be given time and money to build this new product or service? We need to learn about our users and stakeholders, who's driving change, who's advising on how to implement the change, and who will be on the receiving end of the product or service at the end. Now, whilst personas can generate a narrow focal point, they do provide useful insights. Initial user needs, pain points, are they digitally literate? We want to build something that doesn't slow people down but can ensure that we cater for all levels of technical competence. So once we know our users, we can embark on fact-finding. What's the journey that the user is either taking currently, so we can unpick the problem areas to fix, or what journey are we hoping to take with the new service we are seeking to build? Now, it's always better to host face-to-face workshops if feasible. If budget allows, you should seek to gather the team from your distributed network and hold workshops and observations physically. At the Ministry of Justice, we held roadshows just to avoid London-centric thinking. And body language, observation and the working environment all provide additional insight as well as personal interactions to elicit more detail. However, where this is not possible, tools like Mural allow end users to still provide the information that can be used. It uses their own words as well. That's important to make sure that we get their discussions and their thoughts in their manner. So as we build the picture up of our new service, we should seek to validate what supporting services and interactions are needed for our user journey. What goes on behind the scenes to give the end user a painless experience to go about their work or fulfill their needs. And we use this layout to gather further insights, questions, observations, metrics, etc. And on metrics, if you can't measure success, how do you know if the new service or product is good enough? This can be assessed through monetary measures such as earnings or reduced costs, speed, customer satisfaction, increase in customers. And we just kind of know when the service is going to be a peak load, what volumes are anticipated, what security constraints are there, and other non-functional requirements as well, such as multilingual support, any mobile compatibility you need, accessibility, operational support documentation. And again, use workshops, surveys, historical records, spreadsheets, etc. to capture what is in place currently. Underpinning your new service will be a repository of data. So work with the business community to represent their data in their terminology. Start to consider what the shape of the data looks like, how entities relate to each other, which users should access what information. Okay, so we're gathering loads of material, and nothing beats putting material on the wall for transparency, but there are some artifacts that evolve rapidly or need to be accessible to the full team, which, when working remotely, need to be held online somewhere. Here's an example where we used Confluence just to hold links to common sites. We structured our data in an easy to find manner, and we also use it as a single contact source for our team members as well. So, coming out of our first discovery, and you may need to repeat for future delivery phases and increments, we gathered a lot of material. So what I'd recommend next is to do enough to de-risk the upcoming increment of delivery. Now, we've typically mocked up a few wireframes to gather ideas on a solution and formed maybe a sitemap to just trace back how our user needs are being addressed. What works really well is to gather ideas from your users. Provide them with business scenarios and get them to either collaboratively sketch out a design or send in if remote, because harnessing your users is to provide insight is a brilliant way to get them to buy into the solution. It's for them and designed by them. Whilst your delivery team has hopefully an established means of branching code, establishing build pipelines, and has access to the environments needed, there's typically some upfront sprint zero type work that needs to be conducted to enable the team to deliver at pace. As we now learnt more in our discovery phase about the rough shape of the new solution, use this time wisely just to ensure that from a technical delivery point of view, the team are able to start their sprints and deliver business value from the start. Now, this is a typical example of our delivery plan, and this helps to shape our increments of delivery and get everyone on the same page. The layout is aligned to the user journey so that everyone is familiar with the flow, and each increment defines a goal, benefits, and any assumptions, along with a high-level summary of what will be achieved on the user journey. Also, by breaking this down into increments, we should have a better idea on the anticipated effort, which can then be used as empirical evidence to infer sizes of future increments. For example, if increment 1 is half the size of increment 2, and we then therefore deliver increment 1, we can then infer from that metric how long increment 2 is likely to take. Because the quicker we get measurements, the quicker we can measure more. Importantly, it also allows us to triage our backlog, this plan. Any new item that gets raised is aligned, hopefully, to a stage on the user journey, and the business can decide which incremental goal it fulfills. We can then park it and focus on the current increment. For example, I've seen backlogs with 300 or 400 items, and it's impossible to focus on all of them and try to rank everything. This allows us a way to slice and dice the information and make it more manageable. So here's an example. This is Jira, but the same can be achieved in Azure DevOps, etc. And I tend to avoid post-it notes anyway. I find that one open window and a strong gust of wind, and you lose your plan for the sprint. So here we have an example where we've got our increments on the left-hand side here, and we've got our high-level epics, but on the right-hand side is our backlog. And there you can see we had 215 issues in our full backlog that spanned all of the increments, but here we're only focusing on the top 37 because they're part of increment 1. And we can then sort of focus on these and scrutinise them and make sure they're fit for purpose. We flag things so that they're ready, so that when we come to the next sprints, we've got a nice wealth of material that we can draw from, and we're happy that they've been sized, they've got a good understanding of what their needs are, they've got acceptance criteria, and they've been ranked accordingly. But there also we can then see at the top there that there's a ticket that's been added that hasn't got a size there on the right hand side of the screen. And it's been put at the top, so therefore it clearly shows that we need to perhaps focus some attention on that to refine it and get it into a ready state for the team to commence working on it. I won't go into a huge amount of detail here, so please get in touch subsequently for delivery at scale questions. But when you have many projects in flight, all competing for developer attention, we've seen this approach work quite well, where we have distinct backlogs for each project that are owned by product owners. They refine them with the team and promote high-value work into a central backlog for the development team to feed their sprints. Now this places the burden on the business to agree what the focus of the team should be. We're always seeking to get the business to be involved and commit themselves to assigning value. And we shouldn't be afraid to move away from more Scrum-focused ways of working. Sometimes we just can't easily plan for sprints, for example on more research-based activities. So a simple pull mechanism for work is often wiser to consider. And here on the right-hand side, for example, we're promoting the use of a Kanban board for those such circumstances. So to wrap things up, I'll just run through some of the typical events that we would consider including. But please treat this as a library of items. Clearly you don't need to necessarily include all of them for each sprint. So we typically start and end our sprints midweek. This gets over the back from the weekend scenario and avoids the escape for the weekend feelings. Plus, if you have people who are remote but can physically collocate for parts of the sprint, it gives them a break by not expecting them to travel on a Monday or Friday. Duration-wise, a couple of sprints gives us time to get our teeth into the detail, but pivot if we need to change direction quickly. So, based on your delivery plan, you should have a high-level set of objectives to aim for. And by flagging what you aim to be working on, this helps the team to understand the direction of travel. It shapes refinement, and it gives some clarity to the likely features that will be worked upon. It also helps to manage user expectations and dependencies. So if Fred is the key expert on creating a new dependent feature, then we need to prepare him to be involved in the next couple of sprints. Then if he's on leave, we can amend our objectives to work on something that is within our capability to deliver. And this should be readily available to all, either on walls or online. We used to have a television in our area that was clearly showing our sprint goal and those of the next couple of sprints. At the same time each day, and as per the team calendar, we host our daily scrum. And during the daily scrum, I tend to steer away from the usual 3 questions. The whole, what did you do yesterday, what will you be doing today, and any impediments or blockers. Personally, I prefer to walk the board, and I prefer the boards to be online regardless of co-location or teams being distributed. As I said, I've lost too many tickets to a gust of wind from an open window. And this should have all the activities here, which is especially important when remote. So as we walk the board, and if no one said anything at the end, then, well, it's a sign. Are they requiring work, or are they working on things outside of the sprint? And here's an example then of our board, and typically we'd look to review work before we start something new, so we can get things into a done state. We need to get things over into the right-hand side as quickly as possible, so that if we fail to deliver everything, we've delivered the utmost important items in the sprint. I'd rather see 80% of everything done rather than 100% of most things started. So we don't cherry pick, we work in the order that's being given to us. We should always try to work down the board as well, because that maintains and persists the rank order of things that have been brought in. And take ownership as well. Let's make sure that we own these things, especially when we're working remotely, so we know who's working on what items and who to speak to if we need any assistance in a certain area. I'm a massive fan of refinement, as it ensures that business talk to technology and it gives everyone a chance to shape the solution. And I'd recommend a couple at least per sprint. The first is our exploratory one, and we triage new stories into the delivery plan. We conduct magic estimation sessions. We call out any dependencies. We query upcoming work to allow the product owner or BAs to embellish information. And we build acceptance criteria, etc. Whereas the detail one, we focus on the topmost stories to get them ready for sprints. Are they understood? Are they sized reasonably? Are they small? Are they sufficiently full of acceptance criteria? Have they got value, etc.? We get the whole team involved. We get the videos on so that we can share the view of the world. We ensure that the team has access to online scoring tools. Here's an example where we're using pointing poker. We have the product owner sharing the backlog so that the whole team can focus on the same view. We flag, as I said earlier, those that are ready, so therefore we only need to revisit those to refresh scores or memories, or indeed, if something's changed on those, I would expect the ticket to be unmarked as ready so that it triggers another detailed look at the information. But the aim is to enter the sprint with the appropriate level of information orbiting the story. So we build from the as a I want so that layout, so that we have more information. That might be screens, it might be further detail on scenarios, it might be given when then notes, so that we can then feed that into our automation testing and so on, so that we've then got a nice ready story that we can then bring into our subsequent sprint. Not maybe one for the start of delivery, but as the product matures, get the whole team to spend maybe 15 or 20 minutes just testing edge cases, gaps between stories, negative testing, etc. Can we break it before we give our work to our end users? Obviously, we know perhaps where some bodies are buried, and so therefore we should have the chance to just do some wider testing within our teams. Also want to consider as the delivery matures, but as soon as possible, you should start testing scenarios with end users. Can they use the product unaided to carry out their work? Is it intuitive? Don't wait for the retrospective to gather people's thoughts on issues, worries, etc. Experiment with a board, or post an online version via Mural or Ideas board is another good place for capturing information that we may have from remote workers. But basically, any team member needs to be able to add to this. Things in the middle on this example are more urgent, and things further out are less so. And consider grouping as well. So, for example, we may have an area for tech, or business, or execution, etc. But ideally, things shouldn't stay here too long. Let's address them, or maybe move them out into a RAID log, or something that's being actively managed in the long haul. If you're remote from your product owner, then it's important to get a feedback loop going. Now, ideally, your product owner will be present at your sprint reviews. So just ensure they're cited on stories being developed. Of course, they should be signing off stories during the sprint, but it doesn't hurt to have a quick look every so often. Also, gather anyone with any outstanding actions from meetings, retrospectives, etc., and just check in on how they're getting on. So clearly, at the end of the sprint, we review what we've delivered. We've been using Zoom and MS Teams for a while now. It's best to get everyone that is demoing to dial into the meeting and share their screens, even if collocated. This saves on plugging cables in and out. So we remind the audience of the goal and set the demos up and running. Touch upon any additional areas of interest from the team and the business where required, and ideally include some of the UX testing as well. Getting some reactions from users is worth its weight in gold. Then just update your forecasts for the rest of the increment just to see if we're on track and agree the next sprint goal. And finally, we wrap up the sprint with a retrospective. Again, ideally people will be together, but I've been using Ideas Board and Mural for feedback, or Mentimeter for real-time voting, and it's worked really, really well. Here's a Mural screen for our first retro lockdown, and we try to hold warm-up exercises as well, just to get the team into a relaxed frame of mind. One of these was just trying to have people guess whose view from their desk matched the picture. Another one was where the team submitted a picture of something of emotional value, and again we used a word cloud in Mentimeter just to guess whose picture was whose. It's often good chance to hold surveys, for example using SurveyMonkey, just to assess how the team is doing from an Agile maturity perspective. We can measure progress over time and spot improvements and areas of possible weakness to address. Also, think about how you present your findings as well. Sometimes it's best that thoughts are anonymous, but you can be creative in presenting this. And we find that the word clouds are a great way to express this. And finally, when we all get back to our desks, please try to escape from the office for the retro. Getting the team into a different location can be a great way to unlock ideas and unwind. So, nearly there. When we approach our delivery in some manner like this, I'm a firm believer that it goes a long way to mitigate some of the more common delivery risks. As I said before, so triaging and refining the backlog and forecasting delivery times helps us to manage expectations on when the service will be ready, and pivot and maybe reduce scope just to make sure that we do as much as we can to get things in and on time. To manage usage volumes, we seek to get the metrics up front and build that into the delivery by stress testing our products. If we have a switching personnel, then that obviously have a detrimental effect. So we promote the use of wikis to hold supporting material for any knowledge transfer, and we obviously try to check in on the team morale as well to make sure that the team are happy and working effectively. To avoid working in silos, as we've said, we promote the idea of a single backlog and expect collective attendance to events, and we can mock up any interfaces to allow multiple teams to work at pace with a common agreed handshake between the two teams. To mitigate against resistance to change from the business, this can only really be achieved through ongoing engagement, through workshops, through roadshows, just through showing the business that what we're building is for them, get them in and on board in the design phases, and obviously on the ongoing basis for each sprint, so they're clearly showing the direction of travel for this new product for them. And obviously the agile maturity and the appetite for agile working. We try to aid this through coaching, through show and tells, and hopefully through an incremental delivery plan that every 2 weeks we show some demonstrable value. People really buy into this approach and see the benefit and the reasons for working in this manner. Okay, so to summarise and start to get you back to your day jobs. I've been employing all of these approaches across teams in various states of distributed locations, and with the current climate likely to continue, I hope you've seen enough to demonstrate that with the right approach, there's no reason why delivery that is nimble and aligned to business needs can't be achieved. I'm strongly of the opinion that actually enforces good practice. It makes us be more communicative, and it makes us update information more clearly. It gives us that really good work-life balance, so that we can cut down on travel and spend quality time with our family through reducing our commuting time. So it gives us that flexibility. It doesn't tie us to a 9 to 5. Some people are better working in the mornings and maybe want to skew their working day. So as long as that's accommodated by the team, then there's no reason why that shouldn't be achieved, so that the team can shape how they focus their work, because ultimately we're trying to be focusing on outcomes. And also it allows us to open up the team to a wider pool of skill sets. So our skills diversities can be achieved through drawing from a pool of options across the country and indeed the world, so we can bring the right skills in as and when needed. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time, and I'll now open up the floor to any questions.